Okay, welcome back to the modern revolution. I'm so glad you decided to tune in again, so to speak. When we're here, we don't go through like a long explanation of why you should listen to people. We instead encourage you to listen closely, and then we'll tell you where to learn about them more. It's been an extraordinary, uh, string of good fortune. We've gotten a chance to talk to people that are just amazing, and today is no exception. So, Carly Lucchesi, thank you for spending time with us. I'm so glad you're here.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
And so, Carly, we like to begin with a simple question, but not an easy question, I guess, which is what problem in the world are you working on?
Well, I think the biggest problem in my mind is the problem that we don't really take ownership of our health. And
Okay.
I think that that's kind of the modern revolution that we need to start to see ourselves through, is because at this point, a lot of times we've kind of depended on our doctors to tell us what's wrong with us, our doctors to fix us. And
Right.
unfortunately, just the way that our medical system is going, that's no longer an option. So I think that big push is to, number one, provide people the opportunities to learn about their bodies, to get the testing that they need to
Mm,
really to understand those objective markers, but then also to educate and just to kind of give them the authority to understand what these different markers mean, what they need to keep track of, and how they can really take that authority and that agency over their health so that they can achieve wellness instead of just simply preventing chronic disease, which is kind of that direction that modern medicine is taking us in. And unfortunately, I just think that's no longer acceptable to our generation of people. We're starting to kind of the light bulb is coming on and we're starting to really care a lot more about our health. So I think that that is what we need to begin. And that's, I guess, my
okay.
revolution that I'm
Yeah, I love
encouraging.
it. Yeah, I love it. And I think in principle I'm with you on that notion. And so, but it's a complicated thing you just said because it's not as straightforward as like who not to trust, when we
Right.
start saying like, well, how do you educate yourself? And before I ask you some questions along those lines, could I maybe ask for a brief description of the most broken parts of our current healthcare system? I mean, where are the failures the greatest right now?
I guess depending on where you're located and depending on how much you're an advocate for yourself, I think the
Right.
most broken areas is information
Okay.
because you go to the doctor and you're given your classic chem panel and there's these simple markers that honestly don't tell you hardly anything about your health.
Right.
And then you're sent on your merry way saying, okay, you're healthy as a horse until you have a stroke, 2 weeks later. And
Right.
it's not even a fair system that we don't have those objective numbers and we don't understand what they mean. So I think that that's kind of that direction. And the biggest problem is if we at least know where we're at and we know what it means, then maybe we can start to do something about it. And
Okay.
that's when you start to play into the behavior change and all that stuff, but at least once we kind of start to understand how at risk or take the community of people that maybe earlier in life they start to care more about their health,
Right.
I think that those are the ones that we really just want to help them like, okay, well, check this and this out and let's just trend it over many, many years and just let's see, change this in your diet, change this in your lifestyle, change this, and let's see how it affects your markers instead of, the brutal process of trying to like get a doctor's appointment and take a day off of work and beg for the tests that you need and beg insurance to cover these tests. And
Hmm.
it's just that's not the system that we live in. Doctor's appointments are hard to get. Doctors don't want to order the tests that you truly do need to objectively be able to measure your health. And unfortunately, like insurance won't cover them anyway. So
So,
it's just a broken system all the way around.
okay, so it sounds to me like we're talking about, hey, the system isn't easy to access. It's not giving you information that can protect you. And I mean, I'm guessing that part of when you say there's a lack of information is, well, what are the markers? I mean, I'm not sure that all the markers that we think we should be paying attention to that we've been told over the last 20 years, hey, pay attention to these things, may in fact be the right markers. And I say that in the humility of that. I don't know that we know, but
Right.
from your perspective when you're talking about, hey, these are things that you need to know to understand how healthy you are or not. What do you need to know? What are the types of markers people should be looking at?
So for me, it's gathering the whole picture. So I'm a
Okay,
dietitian,
right.
and so a lot of those nutrition factors really play some of the most vital information because that's a lot of that behavior that we can change. So the things that are important are things like, the level deeper below HDL, LDL, triglycerides, cholesterol. Like
Okay.
let's break that down a little bit deeper. And then also, I need to know where's current micronutrients because if we don't know where those micronutrients are, and even to take it a step further, because there's many doctors who will order a micronutrient level, but they're just looking simply in your blood. Well, I don't give a crap what's in your blood. It needs to go inside the cell. So, what has the ability to get
Mm,
inside the cell in order to do its work to actually help your system? So, it's looking that next layer deeper. What are your micronutrients? What are they telling us? And what are those micronutrients level alluding to in alignment with your genetics, right?
okay.
Because knowing your genetics and understanding, we're obviously in our genetic infancy, the stuff that we're learning is slowly becoming more and more clear, but the stuff that we do know, we can at least understand even from that deepest level of, okay, what are your genetics telling us? Where do you have a predisposition to be kind of that squeaky wheel?
Hmm.
And what micronutrients, what are those levels? And is that level in alignment with what your genetics are telling us? Because if it
Mm,
is, it's kind of that no
right.
brainer. Okay, that 1 + 1 = 2. Okay, clearly you're at a deficiency because your genetics are just in this way. But if it's not, then we've got something else going on, right? So
Okay.
it's
Okay.
it's looking at, okay, is it lifestyle? Is it food? What kinds of foods have you been eating?
Right.
What are the different causes of these low micronutrients and what symptoms are they presenting?
So, I mean, when we take a look at what you just said, right, there's an understanding of yourself that
Mhm.
at a genetic level, you're bio-individual, right? Some folks like to use that term, bio-individuality. Like you're
Yeah,
not like anybody else. Ultimately, you're a
right.
set of genetics that are just purely your own. But we're at, as you say, the infancy of understanding, well, first of all, like how do we break down your genetics in a way that then translate into something you can understand? And in the future, that will be very refined. But right now, not as much as it will be in the future. And then how do you know what's out of whack? I mean, that's
Yeah.
kind of part of what you're saying as well, right? That you may not need as much particular micronutrient as another person based on your genetics, or you may not be able to absorb it sufficiently. And so, you're short for a reason, right? I mean, all of these
Yeah,
things.
absolutely.
So if you want to take control of it, how do you begin the process of identifying where to get those things outside the context of going to your doctor? So you need an education of these are the things I need to go measure. And then where do you go measure it? Like, how does a person begin that process?
Well, measuring it is just going to be, finding somebody who can order you the tests and go to the labs that actually have these. And lucky for us that this is starting to be kind of this new medical wave that's
O-
kind of hitting us where
Okay.
we have personal access to some of these different tests and some of these different labs, and we can get our own genetics test and we can understand that in a
Okay.
way that serves us, that we can then guide our own health journey. But
Okay.
so there's that factor, but then it's the understanding of things, right?
Yes. Right.
Because man, it's so easy to take lab results out of context. And I even find it, as a practitioner that goes over genetic results and goes over these things,
Right.
this is a very deep conversation, right, that you're
Yes.
having
Yes.
with people.
Yes.
And it's kind of scary at times, So even the way that I deliver this conversation to my clients is
Hmm.
done in a very strategic way. So I think that that's sometimes kind of the scary thing because,
Okay.
maybe you have an ApoE4, right? That's kind of your classic like Alzheimer's type gene.
Right.
And oh my gosh, I have the E4. And then your brain goes into this total tailspin. Your life goes into the tailspin. You think you're inevitably going to get Alzheimer's. And it's like, oh my God, what am I going to do? Right. It's
Right.
useless. And it can really send you off the deep end unless you're kind of, check it out. You have this risk, but it never has to present itself if you do this, this, and this. Or
Yes.
if you look out for this, this, and this symptom, as you go throughout your days, you can catch it before it even starts because your genetics are like a light switch, right? This is that nature and nurture thing. So your genes, sure, you might have this predisposition, but if none of your behaviors, your food, your lifestyle is in alignment with that gene, it might not ever express itself. Like
Yes.
I personally, like genetically, I'm a total fat person, but I have always had the lifestyle bred into me right from the start to eat healthy, exercise consistently. And those genes have never, ever presented themselves because I've
Right.
never given them the opportunity.
Yeah.
So there's a lot to say about knowing what you're at risk for and being on the lookout for very specific things that are like alluding to, okay, now this gene is starting to do something about it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, my wife's a naturopath, and in the naturopathic community, the expression that genetics loads the gun and environment pulls the trigger, right? Like that
Absolutely.
idea. And I think we will understand more precisely in the future the notion of epigenetics. I mean, what is it that you can turn on and turn off based on your behavior? Um, I mean, all the things you're talking about, these are subtle things. These have large implications. These have large implications in the life of an individual, and they have large implications on the social level. If you want to take your community, your country, whatever you might want to look at more broadly. Was this a path that you decided to travel like all at once, like you had an epiphany? You're like, okay, this is my life's work. I got to go do this. Or was it more incremental? Did you kind of there was one thing, then another that led you to like, I need to do this work.
It was a little bit incremental because, in the acute care setting as a dietitian,
Mm,
you're pretty much like you're given no opportunity to help people.
right.
And it's a very frustrating system. So there was kind of that nudge in that direction, even from there.
Hmm.
But really, what started my journey was, people with gut disorders.
Okay.
So I thought I was going to want to primarily focus on the gut. But the
Right.
more I kept digging into it, it was like, okay, well, gut disbalance is just still it's still just a symptom of something deeper. So it
Yeah.
was always just this figure out the root cause. And the root cause just always led to that chronic inflammation.
Right.
So, the work that I surround my practice is how can we reduce chronic inflammation? How can
Right.
you begin to understand what's causing it
Right.
and really come alongside it from multiple different angles? Because with chronic inflammation, it's not just stop eating this and all of a sudden you're fixed.
Right.
It's very multifactorial. So, the first step is figuring out, okay, well, what foods, what chemicals, what environmental exposures are
Yes.
you exposing yourself to that's causing your immune system to be a little bit pissed off on a chronic
Right.
basis,
Yeah. Right.
right? And it can be, you can know that your immune system is pissed off because you've got, this amount of symptoms that often will overwhelm you that sometimes are like, oh, I'm just getting older. Well, it's not, your forgetfulness, your anxiety, your brain fog, your achy joints, like a
Right.
lot of this has nothing to do with age. It's simply your immune system's pissed off and it's
Right.
trying to tell you, help me. And
Right.
we often
Yes.
just ignore it and keep doing what
Yes.
we're doing.
Right.
So it's figuring out number one, the low hanging fruit is, of course, right? Like stop eating things that are pissing off your immune system.
Right.
And
Right.
sometimes this isn't intuitive. Like, sure, maybe sugar and flour for a lot of people is going to be that first step. But I've had people with the most random symptoms from, culturally high quality foods like zucchini and sweet potatoes and almonds and lime and stuff that you would never anticipate. But when you really pull through a very in-depth food protocol, it's fascinating how clear the body talks to you when you're given it the opportunity.
That's interesting.
So, yeah, random symptoms, but everybody's body is different. And that's why you need to kind of allow your body that opportunity to talk to you in whatever language it wants to come up one day, whether it's a headache or, diarrhea or bloat or
Yes.
itchy
Yes. Yes.
feet,
Yeah. Right.
however it wants to tell you, it
Yeah.
doesn't matter.
Yeah, that's
Um,
so hard to have a guide, right? Because it's hard to tease apart what's connected to what. And I think part
mhm,
of, you know, people who have your same point of view in the healthcare community is making correlations. I think conditions
mhm.
of the skin, treated topically as opposed to conditions of the skin treated like, well, let's take a look at the root cause here first before we just put an ointment on something, and sometimes you push that condition into the body, right? So you actually are
Right.
counterproductive there. I mean, you're challenging a lot of things. And, in this conversation, there's a lot of revolution going on, so to speak. When you think
For sure.
about the strongest forces in the status quo that you're up against, what do you think are the strongest forces out there that are keeping the system in place?
People's unwillingness to branch away from insurance coverage.
Okay,
They think that that's the golden
that's
standard.
interesting, Carly. That's the first time I've had it put to me just like that. So yeah, tell me a little more about that idea.
Well, if it's not insurance covered, then, it's either not necessary or
Yeah,
it's not a mainstream thing. It's kind of that outlier that
yeah,
isn't something that you need to look at. It's just kind of a nice to do. But, things that aren't really insurance covered for a majority of things is like testosterone levels
right, right.
and any type of micronutrient or an iron study. Like I had a
Yeah,
recent iron study done for my son, and I mean, good grief, it was expensive.
yeah,
So you know, unfortunately, yeah, insurance, we pay a lot for insurance, but insurance does not cover a lot. And then we're
yeah,
under this illusion that our insurance is going to be the thing that keeps us safe and healthy. And the doctor is kind of this gatekeeper to our
yeah,
insurance availability. And, anything outside of that is just diet culture, or it's
yeah,
just
yeah,
a nice to do, or like
yeah.
it's so I
Is
would say that's kind of the gatekeeper.
that's I will have stolen this part of the conversation for many, many future conversations. So thank you for that. Because what I'm hearing is that the insurance company becomes the validator of the protocol, that because it's covered
Absolutely.
by insurance, that the protocol is valuable, that we should listen to this protocol, that this is in fact the way to keep you healthy, as
Well,
opposed to think. Go ahead, tell me what
well,
you.
and that because it is what doctors are allowed to order from.
Yes, yes,
Right? So
yes,
if
right,
my
right.
doctor doesn't feel that this
Yeah,
test is necessary, well, then it must not be, right? But the doctor's just doing it because he knows damn well he's going to go have to do like 2 weeks of prior authorizations and
yeah, yeah,
calling back and forth, and they're gonna deal with that crap. So then they're not going to order that test. They know it's not going to be covered ultimately. They don't have the staff or the time to deal with it.
right.
Therefore, it's just swept under the rug.
Yeah.
So it's kind of that dual approach from, well, what does insurance cover and what does my doctor order?
Yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting to me as like a social cost, as a cost to the country. And here's what I mean by that. So in my wife's practice, we would sometimes, the notion of what role does food play as medicine was a constant conversation, is a constant conversation for us in, within the family. And there were people who were spending, or an insurance company was spending, sometimes thousands, maybe $10,000 a month for treatment of, like, one condition that comes to mind that frequently came up was rheumatoid arthritis.
Mm,
And they would have these medications that were just through the roof expensive. And by tuning the diet to,
yeah.
get people out of many bad behaviors, like fast food just is in the culture so predominantly, like people don't even think about it. And I can recall her, describing arcs of healing that began with, like, we're just going to stop soda and fast food first. Like, that's going to be the first thing we do. And they moved along sometimes an extraordinarily rapid arc of medications that were thousands of dollars a month to coming off medications altogether. And
Hmm.
so if now her practice was did not deal with insurance. It was very time heavy. The first meeting was 90 minutes.
Hmm.
Subsequent meetings were that, most conventional doctors, the economic model has to have a rapid interaction, it's
Yep.
7 to 10 minutes, right? Super, super quick. It's only, I don't care what your intention is, there's only so much you can get done in 7 to 10 minutes, and it won't be thorough. Um, so that from a status quo in the society, having the insurance company being the validator of, like, which way we should go, and then also the gatekeeper of the doctor's knowledge because they only have so much they can offer. When someone comes into you, to talk, what personal assumptions are you having to challenge then? Do they come into you already having resolved, like, hey, conventional medicine did not serve me? Or are you having to kind of challenge some assumptions they have about how their care should go in order to get them into the conversation you want them in?
Selfishly, I would say my goal is to find the person that's so fed up with their current medical
Right,
system
right.
that they're
Yeah.
finally ready to change.
Okay.
Because that's when you can grab that true behavior change. They're
Yeah.
willing to spend the money for the tests that are going to be required to give them that lifelong information that they're going to need.
Right.
And they are so fed up with where they're at and, the 10, 15 different doctors they've had to go to and tell their story and not be listened to and
Yeah.
just keep getting dumped medication after medication on. They're like, I want to be a person who's not on medication.
Right, right,
Like,
right.
where's
Yeah.
that support? Where
Yeah.
is that person who's willing to listen? And that's again this new wave of medicine that I think is coming at us is practitioners like your wife, like myself, who are willing to have those 60 to 90-minute conversations,
Yeah.
get those different tests, and really put them all together instead of just following this classic algorithm of, you have this symptom and here you need to take this supplement then, or you need to take this medicine. And
Yeah.
it's like, well, what if supplements and medicine isn't the goal? What
Right,
if
right. Yeah.
what if, that true behavior change and that
Yeah.
true knowledge and understanding and knowing what to look out for? What if that's the solution? And not to say that medicine and supplements don't have their basis because, sometimes genetically you just don't process a nutrient very well.
Yeah.
And
Right,
like,
right.
I know I'm on supplements, but by golly, I can feel the difference when I don't take my supplements for a few days.
Yeah. Right.
So, and because there's that background information, it's likened to driving a car. Like, sure, everybody can drive a car, like
Hmm.
whatever. But if you know how the engine works, you can be on the lookout for like, oh, I feel this pull on this way. That means this is doing that. I need to go to this part of the motor. I need to inject this oil. I need to do this certain thing.
Yes.
And it's
Yes.
it's
Yeah.
just like that with your body. If you know how it works, what's going on under the hood, it's so much easier to take authority over, oh, okay, then I need to change this, and it'll go away. And if it doesn't go away, then I got to dig a little deeper and figure
Yeah.
out something else.
Yeah, self-knowledge is like the key to so many things, right? I mean, certainly
Right.
psychological self-knowledge, why am I behaving the way I'm behaving, but physical self-knowledge, why does my body feel the way it feels? And I have used this expression often, but I feel like we have many of the walking well out there. They're not sick, but they don't
Mm,
have an insight into how well they should feel.
right.
Because for example, like sleeping. If you're not a good sleeper, and there's lots and lots of things we could talk about for that. But if you have a good night's sleep and you haven't had good night's sleep in a while, you wake up and it is a different world you come into.
The
Like
colors are brighter.
the
Like,
colors are brighter. It's like, oh my God, what happened to the
right.
world of yesterday? This is like your disposition. Everything is really different. I have friends. I'm fastidious about exercise, but I have friends that maybe not so much. And um, then they go exercise for some short period of time and they come back and they're like, it's almost worth it to stop exercising just because I feel so amazing when I come back to it. And then what they mean by that is that the contrast between what it feels like
Right.
to be taking care of your body physically and not. Well, there's lots of things that we could talk about to kind of dive into all of these ideas. But for today, like what's a small behavioral change that someone could make to orient themselves along the lines that you're describing here? I mean, what might somebody do to either start listening more closely to their body or maybe, seek out the right guide to learn how to do that? What's something small someone could do to help with that?
Oh man, that is a loaded question because there's so many different directions that they could go.
Hmm.
There's kind of your classic eye roll type answers that, eat better, all
Yeah,
that
sure.
stuff. And
Right.
but ultimately, I think that the first step that people need to do is get tested for certain lab markers, whether it's, looking at your insulin, looking at your ApoB, looking at, your B12, your folic acid, and not just like your serum levels, getting, the lab company that I use is SpectraCell. That's the one that really looks inside that cell
Right.
and looking at, well, where are you currently at? Because
Hmm.
I don't want the first step for people to hear is take a B vitamin supplement,
Right, right,
or, you need to pull fat out of your diet or stop eating carbohydrates altogether. It's like, well, that's not necessarily the solution, because for some people, fat's not a problem for them. Like, they do amazing on a high fat diet. Whereas others, good grief, you can get your lipids so out of whack because you're on a high fat diet.
right.
So if you don't have that snapshot of where you're at, that is kind of where you're going to do yourself wrong. You're going to maybe potentially send yourself into a direction and expend a ton of energy in a direction that's really not useful. So I
Yeah,
think it's getting the tests done. And then if you don't have the resources or the time to research what the heck those mean, find somebody who's willing to help you through this, to kind of hold your hand and guide you through this
yes,
journey, right?
yeah.
Because it's not just, you know, somebody telling you eat more fruits and vegetables and eat less
Mm-mm.
meat. Like that's not the solution, right?
Right.
Then it's kind of somebody coming alongside you and figuring out like, okay, well, what else is going on? Like, why are you not doing these behavior changes?
Right.
And ultimately, because I focus on inflammation, is, well, where is that brain driven inflammation coming from? And how can we kind of address, whatever weight loss needs, whatever behavior changes we need to do? But it's digging into that cognitive side of things and understanding, okay, well, is your brain part of the problem? Because,
Hmm.
bottom up inflammation that we were talking about before with genetic and environmental factors,
Right.
like, sure, that can create its own inflammation, but it's the exact same thing that can happen from an unmanaged mind too. So you
Mm,
can be creating those hormonal cascades. You can be creating that chronic inflammation, that stress response from the way that you're processing your life.
that's
And
interesting.
if you're not doing it consciously, intentionally, chances are your subconscious brain is kind of getting, it's kind of, it's leading you in a direction that's ultimately not serving you. And
Yes.
sure, your subconscious brain may be trying to keep you safe and keep you in the cave and trying to keep you,
Sure. Yeah.
fat and happy, but ultimately it's leading you to that life of stress and that fight or flight response that's left on, and dysregulated hormones, which
Hmm.
can lead to that dysregulated gut. And then you're kind of onto that path of chronic disease, right?
Yeah. 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 I mean, I think what part of the resistance I would think you would have is a resistance to the amount of work that you're talking about. Because I think that when you began, like what you just said, like, oh, if someone says just take a B vitamin, just you need saw palmetto, you need, pick your fish oil, pick your substitute for conventional medicine's approach to the issue. Hey, just take this thing and then you're done. But what
Right.
you just said to me is like, hey, this is a complex idea. This goes into what are you thinking about? Like, what is your mental health?
Hmm.
Because your mental health may be affecting your physical health. Well, what are you eating? Because maybe what you're eating is affecting your mental health, that then screwing up your physical health.
Right.
And, and pretty
Yeah.
soon, we really have to spend some time teasing apart this. And it's some people, I think, bibliotherapy, they can read or they can, you know, watch YouTube. I mean, I think there are people who can go extract from the world and be able to have the wisdom to tease apart what's useful and then what's just entertainment and then what's actually some agenda below.
Right.
They're selling things. However, most people need some help, I think.
That
And
short and sweet, quick information.
yeah, shortens the period of time in which you're trying to learn. Well, let's
Okay.
say let's say someone's like trying to find you. Like where what maybe they're going, well, I want to work with Carly. Like where can they come find you?
My website, yourlivinghealth.com, my handle, Your Living Health, on Facebook, Instagram.
Okay.
I've got a free course that people can go through if they're interested. I even have a very good inflammation screen that
Okay.
I'm offering right now with a consult. It's very low cost, and it's kind of giving you some of those outlier markers that
Okay.
you need to start taking ownership of. But along that lines, like you were asking for, that I was very hesitant to give you. But that short and sweet, maybe step one
Hmm.
is, I would really encourage a majority of people to eliminate soy from their lives.
Okay.
Just that would be from going through a food protocol with hundreds of people.
Hmm.
Soy is very reactive to our systems, and it does present in a very different ways. Sometimes it's headaches, sometimes it's GI upset, sometimes it's just generalized inflammation. But for the most part, soy is very poor for our systems,
Okay.
whether it's soy protein, whether it's soybean oil. The more processed, and this is a sneaky one because it's in a lot of our food supply.
Yeah.
So that would be step one. Check your labels. If it says soy anything, try a different brand.
Hmm.
They might take a little bit higher pride in their product and be using those higher quality oils.
Right.
And that would be like step one. And let's see how you feel off of soy for sure.
Okay. Okay.
Another one that's going to be a generalized supplement that's just good for everyone is just a high quality EPA DHA
Hmm.
supplement,
Hmm.
one that's, non-heat treated or it's processed in a way that it's able to cross the blood-brain barrier
Hmm.
because you want to have EPA DHA. Your inflammation pathways are like these positive feedback loops that unless you break the cycle, it just keeps going.
Yeah.
So EPA DHA, that's what they do. It just puts a halt on this cycle. So the more you can get into your system, the better off you're going to be. And it's even more valuable if it's able to cross the blood-brain barrier, because
Okay.
then it's going to stop that brain inflammation, which can be seen for a lot of people with brain fog, forgetfulness, kind of, that
Yeah.
dementia type qualities. A lot
Right.
of that is just simply from brain inflammation.
Yeah.
Obviously there's the other side, and then you can dig deeper and, with methylation and your B vitamins and all that
Yes.
stuff that
Yes.
can
Yes.
cause the same symptoms. But a good quality EPA DHA supplement does not hurt anyone.
Yes, right, right, right. Okay, well, that thank you. I mean, that those are very actionable things, and I love that you have something free that somebody can get their toe in the water and just experience, the way that you teach and the way that you advise before experiencing, a consultation that then costs money. Because I think
Hmm.
it matters. I think the way people deliver information, the personal connection between
Yep.
my wife had a professor in her medical school, and the professor was like, "Look, you're actually the biggest medicine that person's going to get." And what the professor meant is like the presence, the relationship between the doctor, the provider, and the client, the patient, lots of magic happens just in that relationship, the information aside. And so I think it's valuable to make sure that you're able to come into a relationship with somebody who's trying to help you, that there's good, pun intended, chemistry there, that you can
Yeah, there's
then,
connection.
there's
Yeah.
connection. Because I
Sometimes there's
just,
not connection. And like you're saying, it's valuable to see that ahead of time.
right. So I just appreciate the fact that you give people a chance to get to know you before that. Okay. Well, Carly, one more time, like where can they find you again?
Yourlivinghealth.com. I also have a podcast, Your Living Health, that
Oh,
goes over
nice.
a lot of the cognitive, the mental brain changes
Nice.
to reduce your chronic inflammation. So you can check me out there again, get to know me there. Check out that free course and book a consult if you're feeling inclined.
Okay, Carly. Thank you very much. I appreciate the conversation.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Okay, so today's modern revolutionary, Carly Lucchesi, was moving us forward. She's thinking about these problems not just to solve things in her own life, but to help you and to move us forward as, as people wanting to achieve optimal health, to reduce disease, to live the best life that we can. You got to have bravery to bring your ideas to the world. Have a podcast, have a practice, come on other podcasts. And I hope that that's inspiring to you, that you bring your ideas to the world, because the modern revolution needs us all.